Now let me tell you just a bit more about Adam Mickiewicz. Adam Bernard Mickiewicz is, of course, a very natural choice for inclusion in the Polish cultural garden. Having spent much of his life in exile, he may have felt at home here in the gardens, where one can so easily move between cultures and communities. Not only is his work at the core of the canon of Polish literature, his life serves as a model of the engaged intellectual. Widely regarded as Poland's national poet, Mickiewicz was adopted over the years by many participating in a variety of causes. One might say Mickiewicz's poetry even helps to define the Polish nation. It certainly became for many a standard description of Polish life at a specific period in time. Born in 1798, just shortly after the partitions of Poland by its neighbors, Mickiewicz himself fought for the Polish cause, not just through his romantic poetry, but also through his support of various political groups and causes, especially in the last decades of his life. Born in Nowogródek in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, Mickiewicz became a representative of a Poland that was slowly beginning the transformation to a modern world. His lyric poetry described the world of the Polish gentry and the culture they dominated, even as that culture was beset with the challenges of foreign imperial rule. He was also very clearly marked by the identity of the region of his birth. In a region dominated by ethnic Lithuanians and where the peasants spoke Belarusian, Mickiewicz grew up with exposure to both Catholic and Greek Catholic traditions. Mickiewicz knew the folklore in his region well. The folklore is present most clearly in the title of one of his best-known works, Dziady, or Forefathers' Eve. The title refers to the pagan rite of calling on the dead and offering them food on All Souls' Day. Events from his childhood also made their way into his work. Mickiewicz was just a young teenager when Napoleon's army entered Nowogródek in 1812. The King of Naples requisitioned his family's home, so he had a place to stay, an event that became material for, arguably, Mickiewicz's greatest work, the epic poem Pan Tadeusz. Mickiewicz went to a gymnasium run by a local Dominican order, and then on to study at the University of Vilna, the best university in Poland at the time. There he studied Polish literature, ancient languages, and history. The young student also became active in the student organizations of his day, showing his interest in both political causes and social life. The student group of which he was a part, the Philomaths, took as its slogan, "Motherland, Study, and Virtue." Though this short-lived group does not seem to have been engaged in explicitly political activities, it nonetheless drew the attention of the Russian government, which dissolved the group and arrested many of its prominent members, including Mickiewicz. After his arrest and 6 months of imprisonment from 1823 to 1824, Mickiewicz would never see Poland again. The conditions of his exile forbade him to live in Lithuania or in any of the western districts. Thus, Poland's national poet never set foot in Warsaw. Mickiewicz had already started writing poetry by this time. Though not as well known as his later works, at least one of his early poems is worth mentioning, titled Kartofla, or The Potato. It was written in 1819, and it depicts the discovery of America, and so may be of special interest to us here in an ethnic garden in the United States. The poem describes how some in the Christian heaven oppose the expedition of Columbus, knowing that the Native Americans will be the victims of Columbus's discovery of the New World. St. Dominic, however, successfully argued that the advantages of the potato for the hungry peoples of the Old World counted more than the slaughter of the Native Americans. The poem ends praising the liberty America would offer and the influence that this liberty would have on tyrants in Europe. Mickiewicz's exile, from the age of 26 to his death at 57 in 1855, was spent in Russia, Italy, and France. Before his arrest, he had already written the first parts of Dziady, Forefathers' Eve, parts 2 and 4. The poem was written in different parts at different times and never completed, making it a very confusing work to study. Part 3 was written only later in Dresden. Centered around the folklore of All Souls' Day, the poem combines folk wisdom and the philosophy of the Enlightenment. And in the words of Czesław Miłosz, another Polish-Lithuanian poet, Jada is a pronounced manifesto of individualism as a revolutionary force struggling against a social order that makes love dependent upon class divisions. In the same decade, Mickiewicz also published the Crimean Sonnets, with references to Islamic poetry and the inclusion of many Turkish words. Like other Romantic poets, he showed an interest in the Orient, but he never left his political motivations completely behind him. Just 2 years after the Crimean Sonnets, he published Konrad Wallenrod, a tale in verse of a pagan Lithuanian hero raised a Christian by Teutonic knights. Learning of his Lithuanian origins from the singing of a Lithuanian minstrel, he avenges his country by betraying the Teutonic knights. The political import of the poem was clear, but it passed the censor in St. Petersburg. In any case, Mickiewicz left Russia shortly after the publication and found himself in Rome at the time of the 1830 uprising. In the 1830s, Mickiewicz continued to work on Jada. He also published the books of the Polish nation and of the Polish pilgrims. The books of the Polish nation made more clear Mickiewicz's messianic idea that Poland was to redeem the nations of the world through its own suffering. The mystical work opposed a spiritual Poland to a materialistic Western Europe and illustrated how Poland could lead the other nations to freedom. It was also at this time that he wrote Pan Tadeusz, a description of Poland's gentry society. This epic poem, perhaps the last such poem in European literature, is a rich description of the poet's native Lithuania in 1811-1812. It includes descriptions of manor, gentry farmers, peasants, tradesmen, a Jewish innkeeper, and not least, a description of Napoleon's expedition against Moscow. The poem, various parts of which are described as heroic, comic, or as parodies, declared the peasant a free citizen. But perhaps the poem is revered not so much for its politics as for its descriptions of the Poles themselves. The literary critic Manfred Kredel described Pan Tadeusz in the following way. The figures peopling this poem are individuals standing in general on a rather high cultural and social level, attached to all that is Polish, hardworking, enterprising, industrious, humane in their dealings with their subordinates, with highly developed family feelings, moderately religious, moderately liberal, with a sunny philosophy of life, moderately egoistic, but capable of great sacrifices in matters concerning the common good, frequently quarrelsome and hypersensitive in private affairs, but capable of solidarity in national affairs, born to soldiering, gay, witty, fond of play without extravagances, rash and violent by nature, but easily making peace after an outburst, accustomed to liberty and personal freedom, and jealous of it in both private and public relationships. Mickiewicz did not publish much after Pan Tadeusz. In his last decades, he became more of a professor and political activist, only occasionally publishing poems. He taught Latin at the College of Lausanne and lectured in Slavic languages at the Collège de France in Paris. He became especially active in 1848, helping to organize a Polish legion in northern Italy. He also wrote explicitly in favor of equal rights for all. After the failure of the revolutions in 1848, he edited an international socialist paper in Paris. In 1855, he went to Constantinople in an effort to aid the Polish and Cossack legions fighting against the Russians in the Crimean War. He contracted cholera and died suddenly. His body was returned to France, but removed in 1890 to the royal crypt of Wawel Castle in Krakow, a city he was not able to visit during his life in exile. Thank you very much.